Hey guys, Lunch Money Comics here. It is a gloomy, rainy day in Plainville, Connecticut. My original plans were to go to an outdoor flea market, but of course the weather changed those plans. A quick search on the internets found this indoor antique place nearby. Let's check it out, see if there's any comic books in there. That's cool. Cool.
This is what happens when business takes that off.
Oh my goodness. I don't have that much time. Wish I did. Wow.
And you know the business. I'm not going to sell them all.
Oh, neat.
Those are all Batmans there.
All Batmans?
All Batmans. You got some X-Men over here.
I like X-Men.
Yeah.
Right, that one's slightly better shape, right?
Yeah.
Another flea market. Okay guys, there were a lot of comic books in there, more comic books than I had time to go through, but I ended up getting some pretty good comic books and I really didn't spend that much money. So let's go back to the house and I'll show you guys what I got. So there you go guys, that was the flea market at the Crossing in Plainville, Connecticut. I didn't intend to go to that place in the morning. I meant to go to an outdoor flea market, but the weather actually worked out for me because there were a lot of comic books at this little indoor flea market. So before we talk about what I got, just a quick reminder, if you like this sort of stuff, go down, hit that like button, leave me a comment, feel free to subscribe, and find me on Instagram under Lunch Money Comics IG. Let's talk about some comic books. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have a bit of a cold and I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna try to make this video as quick as possible. So yeah, I mean, this place was actually pretty cool. It was split over 2 different floors of like this old brick building. And, you know, I was not expecting anything, but there were comic books everywhere. And I got there right after the place opened up, so a lot of the vendors hadn't quite got there yet, which gave me a little bit of time to like scope out all the different booths. So there were comic books right when I walked in. Again, the vendor wasn't there yet. There was a guy working there who said, oh, he'll be here in a minute. So I got to kind of go through the comic books I could access. There were a couple I was interested in, but decided to kind of make my rounds until he came back. In the very next booth I went to, there were comic books everywhere. There were glass cases full of comic books, and I could see in the background, there were boxes just full of them, just sort of disorganized. But I couldn't get in. You know, there's like a partition up, and as I'm peeking around, this woman shows up behind me. She goes, oh, I'm here now. I can open up and you can look. And I told her I was interested in the comic books. And she went on to tell me that her husband was the one who was really into comic books, and he had passed this previous year. She was always like a big jewelry person, not so much into comic books, but because her husband did it, she knew a lot about comic books. And she was basically trying to go through all of these comic books, like a little at a time, inventory them, send some of them in to be graded. So, I mean, she definitely knew her stuff, but the comic books were everywhere. So she basically said, you know, I can dig around, see what I could find, but we'd have to kind of like look up prices on the fly because she had nothing priced. And honestly, there was too much for me to look at. It was just an absolute mess. There was just stacks of stuff. I looked around and I saw a couple of comic books that were close to each other, not in great shape, but I'm really happy to have found them. Number 1 is Super Villain Classics Galactus: The Origin. This is a really, really cool comic book, basically telling the background, the history of Galactus himself, the big man. So this was actually written by Mark Gruenwald along with Stan Lee. We have art interior by Jack Kirby. The cover, though, is done by Bob Layton. And I love Galactus. I think Galactus is an awesome character. And spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know anything about Galactus or doesn't want to be spoiled. You know, he's the devourer of worlds, and this basically tells his story of him being a mortal man or alien in the previous universe before this one. And he basically became one with that universe at the big crunch of that universe and was reborn again on the Big Bang of the current Marvel universe. So this tells his whole story, basically, of where he came from. It's an awesome read. It's such a great read that as soon as I got home, I cracked it open and I read it. Awesome. I love it. The only thing I don't love about this comic book is, quite frankly, I don't love this cover by Bob Layton. I love the way Jack Kirby draws Galactus. In the inside of this book, he looks awesome and intimidating and cool. And on this cover, he just looks like a dude. I don't know. He just looks like a guy. So that's the only knock I have against this book. It's a great story in its own right. Really, really cool. And it's not in great shape at all. I consider this a reader copy. The dark cover shows all these color breaks everywhere, but wicked happy to have this one, guys. Great comic book to add to my collection. Right next to it, I found an X-Men book I did not have. This is Uncanny X-Men number 239. This is from 1988, written by, of course, Chris Claremont. The art is by Mark Silvestri. And this is the second appearance of Mr. Sinister and his first cover appearance. I believe it's also the first cover appearance of Madeline Pryor as the Goblin Queen. Now, this is sort of the beginning or prelude to the Inferno storyline, which is based around Madeline Pryor and the fact that she is, again, spoiler alert, she is a clone of Jean Grey made by Mr. Sinister himself. And I won't get into all the details of the whole Inferno saga, but it's really, really cool. And it was one of the first big X-Men crossovers. All the different X books, X-Factor, Excalibur, X-Men, all crossed over in this event. Really cool. Mr. Sinister's a great character. I think a lot of people have been sort of specking on him. I think he's awesome. He's a great X-Men villain. He's been great actually in the modern contemporary X-Men runs that have been going on. They've really built him up to be a lot bigger than just a one-note villain. Very, very cool. I did not have this comic book. I'm happy to have it. I do have his first appearance. I have his first cameo appearance, but I didn't have this one. So, it's pretty beat up. It's pretty warped. You know, it had some sort of like moisture damage, I think. But yeah, I was happy to have this one. And I got both of these. Here's the crazy thing. I got them both for $5 total. So, $2.50 each. And she definitely told me to come back when she's gone through more of those comic books and pick through them and maybe get some more stuff. So, I may take her up on that. Pretty great. So I continued to walk around, and like I said, there weren't a lot of vendors there yet, so I was just peeking in their booths, lots of knickknacks, you know, antiques, kitchenware, things like that. But no sooner did I take another corner than I saw another booth that was full of comic books. There were long boxes and short boxes, and there were like wall books on the shelf, and there was even a glass case full of like better books. And the guy who was in there was an absolute sweetheart. What a nice guy. We had a great conversation about comic books. He asked me what I liked, pointed me to the correct boxes. You know, so I was looking through like the X-Men books and things like that, and there was nothing that really jumped out to me that I needed to have, but there were some books in that glass case, so I asked him to unlock it, and I went in there and grabbed them. And before I said a word, he said, the prices on these are a little high. And I was thinking the same thing. He said, I haven't priced them since like the peak of the comic book boom. He said, how about we look them up on our phones together and come up with a price? I said, okay. So on his suggestion, you know, we took out, you know, the eBay app and, you know, went to Sold and we came up with a price for these. So I'll tell you what I bought these for after I tell you what they are. So the first book I got, it's going to look very familiar to you because it is Uncanny X-Men number 239. To be clear, I had just bought one 5 minutes earlier. I got another one. This one's in much better condition. That one is definitely a reader copy, but I was super happy to have a nicer one that I can add to my collection. So whenever you can upgrade, guys, it's fine. It's not like I spent a lot of money on the other book. I didn't mind having this one here. So I got another much better number 239, and this one's perfect. I don't see anything wrong with it. No spine ticks or color breaks. Awesome looking book. The next one will also look familiar to anyone who's watched my show for a while. It is the Uncanny X-Men number 244. This is from 1989, written by Chris Claremont. I think it's also Silvestri art. And this is the first appearance of Jubilee. Jubilee, not one of my favorite X-Men, but I do collect first appearances of X-Men. And I will say this about Jubilee. She certainly exemplifies the early 1990s X-Men. Whether you like the comic books, you know, written by, you know, art by Jim Lee, or you like the animated series especially. She sort of filled that role of like, you know, what Kitty Pryde did back in like the 70s and early 80s. Jubilee sort of filled that role as like the newcomer to the X-Men. So very happy to add this to my collection, even though I already have one back there. But this actually is in better condition. And like I said, I keep finding these books whenever I'm at like flea markets. I either get them really cheap or I trade for them. They sort of always fall into my lap. So maybe I'll end up trading that one. They'll have my collection and this will replace it because it's a better condition one. So first appearance of Jubilee. Very cool. All right, this last one is a pretty cool book. I've never owned this book before. I see it all the time, but I've never owned it before. This is Jurassic Park #1, made by Topps. This is from 1993. This is the official comic book adaptation of the movie. Came out in the same year. And I see this book all the time, guys, at flea markets and, you know, in comic shops. This isn't a poly bag. It comes with like 5 cards and like a coupon or something like that. And I always see it outside of the poly bag. So I was kind of excited to see this in perfect shape in the bag. And what makes this one so interesting is that, you know, it's written by Walter Simonson, but the art in this is by 2 huge names in comic art. It's Gil Kane and George Perez did the art for this comic book. How cool is that? So Jurassic Park was pretty big for me, being a teenager in the, you know, in the 1990s. Jurassic Park was a huge film. I love Jurassic Park, and this is a really cool comic book. Didn't have it in my collection. Happy to add it. It's outside of my comfort zone of, superhero comics. It's not a big deal. But I like bringing this one up because it's also, there are many variants of this book, and one of them is super rare. It's like a holochrome cover, and they only made like 7,500 of them. If you ever find that book, it's worth big bucks. I've never seen it in the wild, ever. I always have my eyes peeled for it, but happy to get a good condition one in the poly bag, and it barely has that poly bag sort of stripe going down the middle. So here's what I paid for these three. Originally, his prices on them were, I think he had 40 on Jubilee, and he had 20 on the Mr. Sinister and the Jurassic Park. And when I first took them out, he's like, I'll give them to you for 50. And then he said, well, let's look them up, actually. I said, okay. So when we looked them up, we came to a fair market value of $60. And I didn't say anything. He just said, all right, 60 bucks? I'll give them to you for 30, half price. Okay, so I got all three of these for 30 bucks. So I kind of chalked that up in my mind as like, I'd say this was probably 20, and these two are like $5 each. And again, I didn't talk him down or instigate any of this negotiating, guys. He basically said, these are priced high, let's look them up together, agree on a price, and I'll give it to you for half. And that was all him. So that guy, great guy, whoever you are, thank you so much. Absolute gentleman. And thank you for selling me these books for a really, really great price. Happy to add them to my collection. So I finally made my way back to the beginning of the flea market where I saw that first box of comic books. And I had picked out 4 comics I was interested in. One of them was an old like Dell Mummy book. One was a Fantastic Four book. One was an X-Men book with like Wolverine as Weapon X on the cover. I think it's the first appearance of Lady Deathstrike, like in full. And the book I'm about to show you. And that guy finally showed up, and we were looking at the books, but 3 of those books were in pretty poor condition, and the prices that he was kind of giving me didn't really make sense to me. But the last book was the one I wanted the most. It was the one in the best shape, and he gave me a great price for it. What book is that? It is King Size Annual Daredevil number 4. It's from 1976, written by Marv Wolfman, Chris Claremont, art by Tuska and Severin. The cover is by Gil Kane, who I just mentioned a little while ago. And this is a really cool comic book, guys. This is, we have Daredevil, Black Panther, and Namor the Submariner right on the cover. I did flip through it. It seems like there's sort of like some mob connections, or someone's trying to protect somebody, and Namor's trying to get them, and also Black Panther. So it's like all 3 of these guys all trying to like get or protect the same person. Shenanigans ensue. 3 characters I absolutely love them. And this book is in fantastic shape, guys. Of all the books that I pulled out of that box, they were all in pretty bad shape. There were some modern ones that were good, but of all the older ones, they weren't in great shape. But this one's great. The one thing that was sort of threw me was that it looks like there's a crazy spine roll on it. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's a square bound book, and you can see the front of the square bound up here and not down here. So I thought it was crushed or it had been rolled, but it's not. It's actually perfect. It just was, the wrap was put on crooked. And I actually looked it up, and I saw many other exact copies of this, with the same sort of printing issue. So it's in excellent shape. Happy to have it. And as a Daredevil collector, I'm definitely happy to add to my sort of Bronze Age Daredevil collection. So is that a great cover? Awesome book. And I got this for $5, which I think is a great deal. I think this is probably like a $10, $15 book based on the condition it's in. Happy to add it for $5. So there were more comic books at this flea market. I went down to that basement level. There was a vendor who had like a glass case full of comic books, but there was nothing in there I was really interested in. But, for a small flea market, there were a lot of comic books there. And although they were kind of disorganized, it's definitely a place I'd be interested in going back to and spending more time and like really picking through with like a fine-tooth comb to see if I can get some more gems out of there. But listen, I got 6 comic books, and I'm really happy with all of them. And the best part is, of all 6 of these comic books, I spent only $40 for all of these. So I think I got a pretty great deal. So I'll definitely be going back to Plainville, Connecticut, not only for this flea market, but also for a Comic-Con that is coming up in a few weeks that I can't wait to show you guys. So I'm going to keep this one short because I'm losing my voice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you keep finding comic books in strange, unusual places, and I will see you next time.